Today, this is the fourth hearing on protecting the right to vote, which we introduced yesterday. Before we begin, I'd like to turn to a video to put this legislation in historic perspective.
Those who founded our country knew that freedom would be secure only if each generation fought to renew and enlarge its meaning. Now, our generation of Americans has been called on to continue the unending search for justice within our own borders.
We hold these truths to
be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Yet millions are being deprived of those blessings.
Now let's make this final.
And with that, the Texas elections bill that has made headlines for the last several months is officially law.
The new law will make it harder for the elderly, disabled, and people in urban communities to vote.
Legislative measures limiting ballot access are now moving through 47 state houses right now.
The court took up two restrictions in Arizona. Both made it harder for minorities to vote. Election law experts say the court now leaves few legal weapons to challenge new voting restrictions recently passed in nearly 20 states.
The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is about Congress finally doing its job.
The best way that we can live up to the legacy of John Lewis is to remember that he fought for every American to have the equal right to vote.
We all know that this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. It is an American one. And I will fight until the death to make sure every citizen has that right to vote. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? The arc of the world universe is so long, but it bends toward justice.
It is deadly wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Our work is not finished.
Right now, public officials across the country are carrying out a process known as redistricting. It's happening in my state and virtually every other state, every 10 years following the decennial census. At this moment, state legislatures, county commissions, town councils are redrawing the lines that will help determine the American people, who the American people elect to represent them in Congress and in their state capitals. That means for the first time since the days before Dr. King's March on Washington, congressional, state, and local government legislative districts will be drawn without the key protections of the Voting Rights Act. Because in 2013, the Supreme Court issued its 5-4 decision, Shelby County versus Holder. It essentially nullified a key provision of the Voting Rights Act of '65, Section 5. That Section 5 required localities with records of discrimination against voters of color through racist policies like poll taxes and literary tests to ensure any changes to their voting rules were vetted by the Justice Department before they could be enforced. This requirement is known simply as pre-clearance, and it applied to redistricting. But that pre-clearance requirement, the guarantee of accountability to the voters and adherence to the law, was eliminated by the Supreme Court in Shelby. As today's witness, Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark, has explained, in the absence of a pre-clearance requirement, jurisdictions have less incentive to involve community contacts in the elections process and the process of considering and adopting voting changes. Losing this avenue of participation is particularly harmful for minority voters. Americans have every reason to be concerned about the lack of transparency in this year's redistricting. Without full protections of the Voting Rights Act, state legislators could redraw districts in ways that unlawfully diminish the power of voters of colors. And the truth is, state lawmakers have already taken unprecedented steps to silence the voices of American voters. This year alone, legislators throughout the country have introduced more than 425 bills with provisions to make it harder for people, particularly people of color, to vote. 19 states have gone on to enact 33 of these laws. Some of them set new limits on voting by mail. Others cut hours on polling locations. All of them are designed to achieve the same outcome: new barriers to the ballot box. The proponents of these laws claim they are designed to help prevent so-called voter fraud. But facts show that claims of voter fraud are nothing more than grist for the mill of the big lie. Remember when the former president insisted that he actually won the election last year? He's still at it. That election was branded by his Department of Homeland Security as the most secure in American history. Earlier this month, a team of Republican-backed, quote, cyber ninjas, that's what they call themselves, completed a months-long audit. They collected millions of dollars from right-wing organizations to fund this undertaking. This was going to be a months-long audit of the 2020 election results in Arizona to prove once and for all that Donald Trump finally won. What did they find? More votes for Joe Biden and fewer votes for Donald Trump. Despite this overwhelming evidence, the myth of voter fraud persists. Sadly, it's being weaponized by those who hope to advance their own political ambitions by discrediting our electoral process. So if state legislators and others are going to defame and diminish our democracy, we in the Congress have a duty to defend it. With the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Senate has an opportunity to reinvigorate one of the most important pieces of legislation in American history. I've been here a few years. I can actually remember, and I'll bet Senator Leahy could too. This was a big bipartisan issue. Over the years, Democrats and Republicans voted the same way on the Voting Rights Act. In the words of Senator Mitch McConnell, quote, when he voted for it once, this is a piece of legislation which has worked. I think he's right. Let's keep it working. In our nation, there is no freedom more fundamental than the right to vote. And as our old friend John Lewis said before his passing, it's the most powerful nonviolent tool we have. Our democracy is strongest when every eligible voter votes.